This conference will now be recorded.
So let's try with today with continuous integration, continuous deployment on Beanstack. Okay. Now, so see in our sessions, DevOps sessions, we are seeing how do you do that? How do we do continuous integration, continuous deployment using various tools? Like we need Jenkins, we need a repository, and we create the pipelines, and the pipelines are triggered automatically. The same concept. So the same concept I want to implement now on AWS. But so which is no tools and then no installations. Okay, so we already have services available, and those services so we'll be using for CI/CD purpose. Okay. So let's try that now. So how we do that CI/CD on AWS? So for that purpose, AWS has provided some services, and using those services, we can do continuous integration, continuous deployment. So there are some services, and what are those services? First, we have code. So we have code commit, and then code build, and code deploy, plus pipeline, code pipelines. So by looking at the terms, we understand what is the purpose of these services. Now, can someone tell me what is that service is code commit? Or what do you mean by committing, or what do you commit? Sorry. So what is committing? What we committed actually? What developers committed? Code, right? So where? Repository. Now even I want to create a repository on AWS. So I don't want to use any third-party repositories like GitHub or any other repositories. And then, so once code has been committed, what is the next step? Building. Then we're going to build it. And once it has been built, I would like to deploy. Okay. Then what is the pipeline then? Like automate. How do we automate these steps? Okay. So like we have build triggers concept in Jenkins. So whenever developers push the code to the repository, and then we must so trigger that automated pipelines like CI/CD pipelines. So let's talk about that now. So let me show you the idea how or what we're going to implement today. So this is the after diagram, what we're going to implement. Okay. So first is so there is a developer, let's say there is a development team, and developers commit the code. So usually we know that developers they commit the code to the repository. What's the repository we have been working with? GitHub. Okay, let's assume that developers are pushing the code to the GitHub repository. Okay, I have a GitHub repository. Well, so once we have a GitHub repository, and then so what happens next? Whenever developers push the code to the GitHub repository, and what is the next thing has to take place is code building. Right? We build the code, and after that, code deploy. We deploy it. But where are we going to deploy that code? So let's say I have packages which is an WAR package or web applications. Since I have a web application, we must deploy the packages onto a web server. And in our case, we have been working with Apache, that means Tomcat, I mean. So since we are working with Tomcat, so we're going to deploy that onto Tomcat. But so you must first set up the Tomcat first. Where I'm going to set up the Tomcat? On EC2 instance. Okay. Once Tomcat is available on my EC2 instance, then I will be deploying that Tomcat onto the, sorry, I will be deploying my application onto the Tomcat. But how I'm going to set up that Tomcat? Using Beanstack. So do you remember? So we have set up and Tomcat through Beanstack in the AWS sessions. Okay, anyway, we'll be doing it. So what is the Beanstack then? What is Beanstack? Platform services. So they set up the platforms which is required for us. Okay, so I don't need to install the platforms. So what is the platform I'm going to set up? I'm going to set up a Tomcat platform. Okay, that's first thing. So what are the other benefits of Beanstack? What are the other benefits of Beanstack? Auto scaling, load balancing. Yes, auto scaling, load balancing will be taken care by the Beanstack. Okay, so now this is the best advantage. So you have application deployed onto Tomcat, and which is set up by the Beanstack, and then you don't need to set up the auto scalings and then load balancing separately. Okay, so AWS Beanstack takes care of it all. So we'll do that as well. So I'm going to deploy that onto Beanstack. Well, so now this is what is the pipeline I'm going to design. That's my whole pipeline I'm going to design. So what is the pipeline means? Automated. I want to automate it. What do you mean by automated? So when developers push the code to the repository, the whole pipeline needs to be triggered. So how do you do this in Jenkins? Build. What is the build trigger? Which build trigger? I said that is important. That is the most important build trigger. OLSCM. What are the build triggers you have? So I said, see, that is the most important question in Jenkins, and that is a mandatory question. And the question will be asked in interviews: how you have automated your pipelines? I repeat it almost like number of times. What is the build trigger? Anyone doing hands-on with Jenkins? No one is doing. Tell me, okay, if you don't do it, that's okay. That's your choice. But tell me, what is that build trigger? What is the repository? GitHub. Okay. Then what's the build trigger name? If developers push the code to the GitHub repository, I want to start building my job. So what is webhook? What is webhook? What is payload URL? So we are not done with the course yet. We still have some time to finish the course. We finish all the important concepts. What is the payload URL? What is the webhook? Please tell me, what is the webhook? Where we use the webhook? AWS. What is the build trigger we have used? At least, do you read? Do you read it? What is that? What it does? What it does? So what is this actually? What is this? Now tell me, what is this? What do you call this? What is that? इसके को बड़े
इधर मार्च कौन सा रहेगा
लास्ट वन गाने के वर नहीं मास्क लेको कना पे पंपिचे बैठे Yeah, what is that? Tell me. Did you see it anywhere? Where? On Facebook? Jenkins. Nice. Okay. Bill trigger. Fine. Finally, we got an answer. That's a bill trigger. What this does? What this bill trigger does? Scheduling. Any changes in the GitHub repository? Notifies the job, continuous integration job on Jenkins. So if you do any changes on the GitHub repository, that will trigger, sends a request to the Jenkins to build the job. That is what is GitHub for Git SCM 4. Git SCM 4. Okay. Well, so I want to set up the same kind of mechanism now. Well, whenever developers push the code or commit the code to the GitHub repository, and that GitHub repository sends a request to this pipeline which I'm going to design, and that pipeline will be triggered, and the pipeline has steps. What are the steps? So pull the code, and of course then build it and then deploy it. This is what I'm going to design. Okay. Then as a part of this pipeline, now we are building it and then deploying it. And meanwhile, so you can save your artifacts or packages to the S3 bucket, and from there again you can deploy that to the Beanstack. This is an alternate. Or else, so instead of this, I want to deploy straight away onto the Beanstack. I can do it. So I create some S3 buckets. Into S3 buckets, you can save the artifacts. Okay, that you can do it, and then you have CloudWatch. So what is the purpose of CloudWatch? Monitoring tools. So monitoring is, so I can monitor my build status. I can monitor my deploy status. I can set up this CloudWatch for so the build steps as well as deploy steps, which is on Beanstack. Okay. Now, so when you talk about code build, so whenever you want to do code build, now the code build service does the code build for us. But if you want to do the code build, we need a file which is buildspec.yaml file. So this YAML file so builds the code for code build. So like we have form.xml, so that has the whole logic how the project has to be built. The same way you have buildspec.yaml, and that has so the logic how so your whole pipeline. I mean not pipeline. I mean from your code build. Okay. So now, so for example, since my whole pipeline is on AWS, I don't want to use third-party repositories like GitHub. Okay, I don't want to use GitHub repositories. Rather, I would ask my developers to commit the code to the code commit. So what is a code commit? Code commit service helps us to create repositories on AWS. Okay. So now in case I don't want any third-party repositories like GitHub, and I want to have my own repositories on AWS. So the reason is all these things, code build, code deploy, everything, the pipelines I'm designing on AWS. For that reason, I don't want to take the code or I don't want to use the third-party repositories. So I want to use my own AWS repository. And you can create AWS repositories, which is on code commit service. Okay. So we can do that as well. That is why we have code commit service. When developers push the code, and then comes the code build, and then code deploy. There is an alternate for GitHub repository. Okay, right. So this is what I'm going to set up now. You see that? So this architecture, this is my, everything is on AWS. See that everything is on AWS. And so this is outside repository, third-party repository. If we don't want to use it, now we can use the code commit AWS repository, which is on AWS. The whole architecture of my project will be on AWS, including repositories. So let's look into that first. Now, first I'm going to show you an example how to set up a Beanstack application, and we're going to set up a Tomcat application, and then we're going to implement the whole service. Well, so talk about Beanstack first. Let me log in. I'm getting my AWS Beanstack instance ready first. Okay, so where I'm going to set up a Tomcat so that I can deploy my application which I'm going to build onto the Beanstack. So moving on to the Beanstack. So EBS, say this is not ES. When you say EBS is block storage, block storage, don't get confused. Some people think that EBS is not right, but that's wrong. So let me create an environment. So I'm going to create an environment. Which environment? I will be setting up a Tomcat environment first. Okay, let's see. So there you see that I'm going to set up a web server environment, which is on HTTP. So run a web. What is the purpose of this? To run a website or web applications. Next. So give some names. Just what is application name you are creating? I'm creating an application called, let's say, test application. That's my application name, test application 1. Then scroll down, and environment name as well. So test application 1 environment, and then your domain. Just keep some domain, anything. So, do they have domains as well? Oh, that is nice. Okay, leave blank for output value. So they're asking us to set the domain as well from here. But we can create the domain name through Route 53. We'll be doing it later, not now. Okay, just leave it. That's not a problem. So you can create a domain name, something like this, and check the availability. So that is available. Okay, or else. So this option was not there actually. That's nice. Or else you can create your application. You can get your application ready. After the application is ready, then go to Route 53. From there, you can create your DNS, because this is my web application. So I need to have a DNS name. You can do it right from here or else through Route 53. And the platforms, so go with the managed platforms. What is the platform? So which is Tomcat platform. There is your Tomcat. Okay, select the Tomcat. So Tomcat will be ready to use. Okay, I don't need to install the Tomcat again, and you can select the platform. So Tomcat, which version? Select the versions. See that. What if I want to deploy that onto Tomcat 9? So do we have an option? No, there is not an option. So this is the limitation of your beanstack. So whatever the versions they provide, whatever the platforms they provide, we must go with their platforms only. I want to go with my own platform, but that platform is not available, and that too. So, and which is on, you look at your OS. What is the OS is? Amazon Linux, right? My OS is Amazon Linux, but I don't like Amazon Linux. I like Ubuntu. RHL. Is it possible to change? No, that's not possible. So you must go with the platforms, whatever they set up. So you don't have options to alternate them. So if you want to do that, for example, I want to have on Beans, I want to have Ubuntu and Tomcat 9 with JDK 9 version. I want to have all these versions. In that case, you must set up your EC2 instance and do the configurations and then do the deployment. After deployed, set the auto scaling, load balancing. Okay, well, so that's a limitation anyway. And so I want to deploy a sample application. You can deploy a sample application, or if you have any applications to upload, you can upload the applications. So go with the sample application anyway, which is a defined default application provided by them. Create the environment. So this is going to create an EC2 instance. Well, so when you compare with RDS, in RDS we create the databases, right? We create a database, whatever database that is. But do we have access to log into EC2 instances? Can you see EC2 instance in RDS? No. So those are platforms. I mean, your databases are set up, but so those are not the instances. So you can simply log into the platforms, but not to the instances. But here they're setting up an EC2 instance as well for us. Okay. Now just wait and see. So this is setting up the environment. So create the environment. So let's find out, is it setting up instance? So which one is so is it ready yet? So it is starting. See that, so it is creating and security group. Security groups also getting created here. So it's setting up the whole infrastructure and including security groups. And it's going to set up the load balancers, auto scale groups. See that, creating auto scale group policies. Now it is launching EC2 instance. So what was the name? Test application, right? That's our test name. So now, so back to the environment, which is still creating. So once it is created, it is going to provide us a DNS name, and that DNS name, so we can use it to access the sample application. So the default application we are deploying, we can access that application through AWS Beanstalk. It's creating still. And let's also find out. So for this, so you can look at your security groups and the networking. So that's a role also is created. And so that's a security group. And you can see the inbound routes. That's inbound routes. Okay. Now, so going back to the instance, this is, so I'm waiting for the DNS domain name. Also, we can see the autoscale groups which are created for this. So check the autoscale groups. So which one think try this? Just look at here. I think this is the one. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. So if that is, let's see, let's select it. We check the instance under this Beanstalk auto scale group. Check the instance or instance management into instance management. So I want to check the instance. Is it the same instance is launched for this? For the instance. So that's the instance. And then, so go with the instance. It should be the one. Check the name of this instance. I want to see, so is it our instance, test instance, test application? Yeah, that's our test application environment. So the same instance. Well, anyway, so is my bean stack ready? So it's still being launched. 1 second, refresh. Yeah, this is ready. And then, so this is the DNS. Click on the DNS. That's a domain name. And that's your application ready. But this is a sample application we have deployed. But I want to deploy my own application and which I'm going to build it. Okay. So let's see. Now for that deployment purpose or building purpose, I'm going to create a pipeline. So how do you create that pipeline? Using these services. What are the services? So code build, code deploy, and then code pipeline. First, I will take the code from the GitHub repository and we'll see how the pipeline is designed. And later, we'll talk about the code commit. So since we are familiar with GitHub repository, let me take the code from the GitHub repository and then set the whole pipeline. Later, we'll be looking into code commit. So what are the services? Now, when you go to services, scroll down. So there you have services: code commit, code build, code deploy, code pipeline. Now I would go with some service here. Click on code commit service, and all services are available at one single page. So these are all related services. They are available at one single page. So you can see all these services. Now I will go with pipeline services. Go with the pipeline because I want to create that automated pipeline. So since I want to create automated pipeline, so I will go with create a pipeline. So click on the pipelines and go with the pipeline. And let's create a pipeline. So in the pipeline steps, I will be selecting the rest of the steps like, so where is your repository and how you're going to build it and where we're going to deploy. Please, what is the pipeline? So let's design the pipeline now. So give some pipeline name. So something like, so pipeline 1, something, so pipeline 2. And so this is a service role. So this is like nothing but your IAM role. When you create these services, your pipeline services, and for every service, you need to assign some role actually. So why these roles? What is the purpose of these roles? You see that we are first taking a pipeline service and then we are building it, and then deploying it, and in the meanwhile, we are also using what is the service deploying to the Beanstalk. So we have a number of services integrated. So there is a cross-service communication is happening. One service to another service communication. In that case, we need roles. So now it's creating a role. Let it be create a role. Well, now go with the next. That's a role anyway. Now there comes your first step, which is your source code repository. So where is our repository? Now let's say this is our repository. On this repository, I have some source code. This is my repository. What is the project? So whatever it's a Java project, it's a web application. Now what you can do, you can clone my repository. That is my cloning, fork in. You can fork my repository. Once you fork my repository, then the repository available on your account, on your GitHub account, then you can follow the same steps what I'm going to do. So, but make sure you fork that repository onto your account. Why are you going to fork it? So the reason we need to select our repository here, which is, let's say I'm going to select GitHub repository, and then enter your GitHub account credentials here. Enter your GitHub account credentials. So I can connect to my GitHub repository. That's the reason. Fork that repository into your account. So if you want to fork it, what is my repository URL is? So github.com, and the username, that's my username, and my repository name is AWS Beanstalk example 2. That's my repository name. Go to my account first. When you go to my account, you can see all the repositories, and then my repository name is, that's my repository name, AWS Beanstalk example 2. And then once you are in the repository, you can fork it onto your account. Then you can do hands-on with this pipeline creation. Well, so now connection. So go with connect to GitHub repository. And 1 second. Here you see your source code provider. You also have code commit repositories, right? Or else you can take a Bitbucket repositories. GitHub also has GitHub version 1 and GitHub version 2. So the difference between version 1 and then version 2. So all these things have recently been introduced, versions. So version 2 action code creates and connection with GitHub apps. So use the options below. So this is nothing but when you go to your, so version 1, go to version 1, okay? And then, so you don't have those options. 1 second, just 1 second, going right. So you don't have these options like select a repository, select a branch, right? You don't have this option. So that's what. I can go with version 1, version 2, or should we go with version 1? 1 second. I think we can go with version 2, that should be okay. The reason is I'm looking for this option. So version 1, this is a webhook option. Change default. I think we can go with version 2. That should be okay. Because in version 2 also we have GitHub hook options. By default, it is there. Let's see first. Let's go with this option. Select them. Connect and connection name. So connection name is give some connection name. Connecting means connecting to my GitHub repository. Okay. So once the option is given, so then you AWS connected your GitHub repository. Now in this case, give some connection name. Let's say something like, so repo 1. Give some connection name. Repo 1 connection something. You can give any connection names, or you can give something like, so your repository name. What is the repository name? So Beanstalk repository, and then let's say connection. That's your connection name. Connect to GitHub. Connecting ping. So it'll be connected to our repository. But how your AWS will be connected to GitHub repository? How about the authentications, the credentials? So since I already have logged into my GitHub repository, then it is taking your default log credentials which I have logged in. Okay. So if you are not logged into GitHub repository, and here it would be asking you to enter the credentials. Okay, to enter the credentials. Right. So first, go to your account name. That's account name. So that was my account name. I selected my account name and then connected. Now we are connecting to our GitHub repository. So we are connected, and then the repository name, select the repository name. So that's my repository name. Okay, Beanstack example 2, and the branch. So we have only one branch on the repository. Select that Beanstack and then your master branch. Well, selected, and there you see that start the pipeline on source code change. What is that? What is that build trigger? So like I have said already, so this is like our GitHub hook for Git ACM poll, the same kind of build trigger. Here you don't need to select the build trigger. When you select it, automatically that's considered as your GitHub webhook. So it is going to set up the communication. And then, so output artifactory, so that is nothing but this. So you want to say once code has been built, you want to save the artifacts or your packages into S3 buckets, we can save that. Okay, so they can save your artifacts. So you can save it or you can skip it. That's not a problem. Just skip it. So is it required? No, it's not required. Okay, let's save it in the format, zip format. That's okay. Let's save it. And then comes your build steps. The first step was, the second step was selecting the repository, and the third step is regarding your build steps. Now we are at the build steps. So who is the build provider? I want to go with AWS Core Build Service, and select the region, your project name. So we don't have any projects. Let's create a project. Create project. So give some project name. So my project name is, let's say, specification 1 build. Okay, that's my project name. And here you select the build steps. So what are the build steps means? Select the build environment. So what is the build environment you want to select it? Select the build environment. Okay. And whenever you want to select the build environment, and then just go with manage image. What is the image? So this image is going to set up the operating system for us. So you're building your code. If you want to build your code, you need some image. And what is the image is? That means nothing but which OS, on what platform you want to build your code. Select the OS here. I want to go with, let's say, Amazon Linux or Ubuntu. You can select whatever you like. And then runtime. Select the runtime. So this is your standard runtime. What these runtimes have, what these runtimes are going to set up for us. Runtime and runtime versions. Okay. Now, what are the runtimes and what the versions are regarding? So what is the application we are building? We are building a Java application. For that, you need Java runtime environment. So automatically, code build service is going to set up your Java runtime environment on this. The whole setup is already available on your AWS Beanstalk. So not Beanstalk, I'm sorry, code build service. So the whole type of, so you build whatever the build steps, whatever the runtime environments are required, and those runtimes are prepared by the code build service. Like we remember in Jenkins, whenever we build the projects, we select the build environment steps, right? So which version of Java, which version of Maven, the same things. So the concept is same. The only thing is here this is done on AWS. There we have done on Jenkins. But there we do the setups. But here you don't need to do the setups. Okay. So that is what is your build environment. And again, this also needs a service role. Let's create its own service role. That's service role and build specifications. So what is the build specification? So you need some build file to build the project. What is the build file name? The build file name is buildspec.yaml. That's a default file. So buildspec.yaml. And that buildspec.yaml file has to be also available on your repository. Now, what is this file? This file is regarding just like, so your build file, like we have build files, right? The same thing like a build file, we have format.xml file, so on. Now, what is the file name is buildspec.yaml. That's the file name. And so there you have the build steps. Okay, so these are the build steps. So we have some build steps over here. These are your YAML script. We have some phases and we have some commands over here. And first is some echo command, and second we have build. So what is the command is, I'm going with, so clean, mvn clean, and prepare package. What is the package name is, what is the package name, and the command next in the post build, after build, I'm going to do the deployment. Okay, so the same YAML file will be selecting in our, so what is that window? Okay. Use buildspec.yaml file, that's a default file, and then you want to set up the CloudWatch alarms, CloudWatch. So you can set up the CloudWatch. So give some names. So let's say CloudWatch for code build. So give some names over here, just names. And you want to save these logs in S3 buckets. You can save the logs in S3 buckets if you have any buckets. I think we have some buckets. You can select the bucket. This bucket. You can select my bucket, some different buckets. Okay. And then continue. Okay. So now the steps are ready. We have designed that, we have created a project. What we have done, what do you mean by creating a project? Creating a project is defining all the build steps required, your build environments, and then and if you want to CloudWatch alarms, CloudWatch monitoring purpose, you can set up that. And going with next. So build type, single build or batch build. So this is again like in whenever you build your project, if you go with like a number of parallel builds, you can say number of parallel builds. So what is that? Whenever you build a job in Jenkins, the job will be assigned to a particular processor, not processor. What is that? We have a number of builds, right? What do we call it? So, number of parallel executors, right? Now, whenever you assign a job in Jenkins, so there is an option called executor option, right? Now, in Jenkins, your job will be built on one executor, but here we have a choice of, I can divide my job into multiple executors. That is what is your called batch build. So what is the advantage then? The advantage is the build will be faster. So if you have applications in large size, and those applications can be built in batch builds. So if you have small applications, so it is a single build. Now, so is it cost? I mean, is it chargeable for me? So how this will be charged? So AWS will charge us. So for example, I'm designing my pipeline. When you design the pipeline, for designing the pipelines, there are no charges. But the charges are applicable while you run the pipelines. So I'm building my pipeline, and the whole pipeline takes about half an hour, 30 minutes or 60 minutes. So you will be paying for that particular time whenever your job is, or when your pipeline is built. I mean, okay. Right. So next, and then deploy. So I'm going to deploy to Beanstalk, Elastic Beanstalk. Let's select that Beanstalk. And then what is application we have created? Test application 1. Go with it. And then your environment name, test application 1 environment. So Beanstalk applications, I mean your Beanstalk applications, at the beginning of our session, I've created the Beanstalk application and deploying them onto same Beanstalk environment, which we have already created. Okay. Now go with next. So this is my whole pipeline. So first I have selected my pipeline settings and pipeline names. And second step was regarding adding the source code. The source code is our GitHub repository. And then, so then we have selected our build steps. And finally, this is our deploy steps. Now, just create a pipeline now. After a pipeline is being created, and this is going to trigger the pipeline. We'll be pulling the code from the repository and then building it, also deploying it. So the first thing is, so it is pulling the code, and what is that? That's a commit ID, right? So of GitHub repository. Let me check my repository. Is the latest commit ID? So what is the latest commit ID? Look into the commits. And that's our latest commit. So, and starting with C5AAC. Okay. So let's see, is it the same one? See that C5AAC3. Okay. So it's pulling the same pipeline. So that's execution ID. That's not version ID. So this is your version ID. Okay. And the code has been pulled successfully. It is building the code that's in progress. You can see the build steps. So in the information, click on it. So what are the steps? You can just see the steps. So are these services important? Yes, they are important. Okay. Since we are DevOps engineers and we should know how you design these pipelines on AWS. I've seen some interviews, they are categorically ask you, so do you have experience on these services, the code commit, code deploy services, code build services? Do you know how to design the pipeline services on DevOps pipeline services on AWS? So what are the steps? Okay. If so, so how the pipelines have been designed and what are the steps? There's how they have been automated. What is the build trigger you are using? Okay. So the build step was success, and then we are in the last step, which is deploy step. That's in progress now. Let me find out our application. So that's our application environments. Go to the environment and you can see our that's our test environment. Select these, and there you can see the new deployment is being taking place. Just scroll down. So it is deploying a new version. Okay, so that's why it's in progress. You can see that that's in progress. So view events, you can view the events. So what has been happening? So instance deployment completed successful. Is it the time? Yeah, it's what time? At 9:34. So it was deploying, now successfully being deployed. Okay. Now, so let's give it a try. I'm going with my repository. That's my repository. So I'm going to do a commit on my repository. When I do a commit, I'm going to watch whether once the commit is been done, is it going to build the pipeline on our AWS? So I want to check that. So the communication has been happening between these two, or the build trigger is working successfully. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to modify my code. Something you can modify anything on your repository. Probably I will modifying SRC. In SRC, I have main. I can modify something whatever I want. Something like source resources. With this or other one. So resources. Try that. Probably that one. You can try this. Now edit. And just go with, let's say I'm going to a new modification. Let's say do I commit? Let's say modified on GitHub. Let's say now do I commit? So what's the commit ID? So what is the commit ID? Let's back to the repository, then we'll check the commit ID. But anyway, let's go back to our pipeline. So is it in progress? Now, so it has successfully pulled the code now. So what is the next step is? It's in building is in progress. But look at that commit ID. So that's the commit ID, right? So check the commit ID, 25 commits. And 09FA1D23. That's our new commit. Okay. So I'm doing some commits on my repository, and that is pulling the code from the, so this pipeline is pulling the code from GitHub repository and then starts building again. Here. So the pipeline is successfully triggered. And then building as usual, it will be deployed. So that's in progress, building is in progress, and then it will be deployed as well. So looking into now, in this pipeline, my repository was, what was the repository? GitHub repository. But I don't want third-party repositories. I want to create a repository on my AWS account. And then once repository is created, as usual, we provide that URL to the developers, and they can clone it, they can commit it. But let's see, how do you create a repository? And if you want to create a repository, I can go with code commit and go to repositories. I'm creating a repository. Simply click on that, create repository. And repository name, let's say repo2, and just create. Now the repository is created successfully. How developers are going to clone it? So we just go with the URL. That's a URL, clone the repository, and then so we just clone it, right? Okay, if you want to clone it, we need GitHub repository. Sorry, we need what is that? So git bash, isn't it? I don't think so. I have git bash over here on the system. I don't have git bash, but I need to install git bash. That will take some time to install git bash. So I'm going to give you the steps. So what we do, okay, let's see. Now this is my git bash, let's say. That's my git bash. Okay, on git bash, how I'm going to clone it? Git clone and then the URL, right? That is how you're going to clone it. Now, so once you clone it, now you'll be entering username and the password. Why? These repositories are private repositories. So on AWS, there is no public repository concept. There is no public repository concepts on AWS. They're all private repositories. Since it's a private repository, so we must enter the credentials to clone it or not, right? So we must enter the credentials. Okay. Then whenever you enter the credentials, but the question is what credentials they are. So this user, so am I going to enter this user credentials? So if I do that, enter the user credentials. So who is that user actually? Who is this user? Owner. So he is the root user, right? He is your account owner, AWS account owner. But if you enter this user credentials on your git bash, so you're going to get an error called so permission denied. Why is it so? See, your GitHub your code commit repositories, you cannot use your root account credentials. That's never possible. You cannot clone your repositories using root account credentials. What is the reason? For example, I'm entering my root username. Okay, so username is something like that's a username, root username, and then root user password. That's a password. What security? What do you mean by security? What do you mean by security? Why? Why a confidential? Of course, why? Sorry. What was that? Not regarding this. Yeah, is admin, right? So how? See, who is cloning the repositories? Developers are cloning it. Then why do you want to provide your admin credentials to the developers? See, now we are talking about GitHub access control. Do you remember the access control concepts in GitHub? Same thing. So we are not going to provide, even if you provide the admin credentials, and it is not going to give you permissions to do it. But so developers want to clone it. Tell me how they're going to clone it. So we must provide some credentials, right? What credentials? IAM user, right? So we're going to create an IAM user. So let's create IAM user. So back to IAM.
database provide any context that code is
No. So let's create a user. Go to users. Add a user. Add user. I'm giving a username, something like developer1. That's username, and you can give some access. What kind of access that is? So give some access. So at least you must have programmatic access. So whether console access you give it provide to the user or not, that is different. Okay. So if you want to provide the console access, you can do it. But these are developers, you don't need to provide the console access. But if I'm going with console accesses, I want to go with some password. Okay. So use some password. What is the password? Let's say dev 1 2 3 4. How many letters? Minimum 8 letters, right? 1 2 3 4 5. Okay. So what is the password? Does not confirm the account password. The policy is uppercase, at least one uppercase. Okay. Let's say capital dev, capital D, dev 1 2 3 4 5. That should be okay. Yeah. Let me just look in the password again. Yeah, that's the password. And then next, now go with previous step again. I don't want this user password setup. No, don't want that. Now the policies, we'll assign the policies, but let's first get the user, then we can assign the policies. Create a user. That's the user. And just close the user and go to the user. Close it. So who is the user? Dev1. So if you want to go with user and for cloning purpose, and so we need to assign some policies, some permissions, right? So what policies? Now add permissions are policies, and then so attach policies. So what is the policy I'm going to attach? The policy name is code commit full access. Why do you want to give full access to the developer? So what permissions? So you can go with a power user and then or else read only. Now tell me what is read only? Only? What do you mean by seeing? Able to? What is that? Getting? Are they able to clone it? No. Not able to clone it. Not able to clone it. Then what is the purpose of reading them? Are they able to clone it? Able to clone it? I think you have not practiced your access control concepts as this. They're able to clone it. That is what you mean by read permission. Okay. Well, what is power user then? What is power user? Tell me what is full access? Don't worry about power user. What is full access? Like an admin. Okay. So what do you mean by admin then? Then what is power user then? Did you remember those concepts in GitHub access control? What are the different permissions you have? What are the different permissions? Can someone tell me the permissions? Read, write, admin. There is no execute. Read, write, admin. Can you see the three things or not? So you have read, and what is full access means? Admin access. Then power user means write access. Write access means commit access as well. Okay. So you want to provide that commit access to the user, you can provide commit access. See, that is what I said. If you understand one repository thoroughly, you can work with any repositories. But if you don't understand the first repository itself, you won't be able to understand any other repositories. The concepts are same. Even when you go to Bitbucket repository or DFS or any other repositories, you have the same concepts. So that knowledge is required initially. That's the reason I have been asking you to do good hands-on. So what do you do when you practice it? Just to copy paste the scenarios, or what do you do? See, if you don't copy paste the scenarios which I do, so that won't help you out. You need to do something beyond that when you practice it. That is what called practice. Well, go with next. If you keep practicing on it, then you get the ideas. You spend your time. Okay. So add permission. How are you going to attend the interviews if you can't answer these simple questions? Okay. Well, anyway, now let's again back to clone. So I'm going to enter, I'm going to clone my repository. Now here, what is the username now? Dev1, and the password is, that's the password. But still you get same issue. Permission denied. Why is it so? So remember, when I was creating this user, for this user I have given also programmatic access plus console access, right? And if you want to log in to the console through IAM user, I use these credentials. Okay, but so whenever you want to clone your repositories, commit your repositories, these credentials does not work. So these credentials only for the console purpose, so not for the repository purpose. So the repository purpose, they provide different credentials. So where do you see the credentials? Under security credentials. And then scroll down, there you can see your HTTPS AWS code commit credentials. These are your grid credentials. Now generate those credentials. Sorry, is it gone? 1 second, let me again do it. I think that is gone. 1 second. So generate again. So these are the credentials. So that's a username. We provide that username. And then what? Password. So provide the password. So that's the username and the password. Okay. And then the developer will be able to commit and then also clone. So he will be able to clone it also committed. Clone and connect. Okay. Now tell me why these credentials are required. Why we cannot use those other credentials? See, these are for developers purpose, right? These are for developers purpose only. If developers have those credentials like dev1 and dev1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if developers have my credentials, now there is a chance of logging into my AWS console using those IAM credentials. So that's why. So for repositories, they provide different credentials. Yeah, this is how the securities are provided to the repositories, and you can control their permissions. Okay. So now you can try the same thing. So what you can do, you create a repository first. Okay. Okay. Where is my repository? We already have created repository. Now create a repository first. Once repository is created, back to repositories. That's a repository. So I don't have Git bash actually. That's the reason I'm not able to show you, but you can try them. So you just go to, once you commit, and then you go to repositories and check the commits you have done. You can see the commits, all the commits. Okay, so you should be able to see the files and then commits over here. Okay, right. Okay, fine. Now going back to our pipeline. So where is the pipeline? That's my pipeline. Pipelines. So which pipeline we have created? Pipeline 2 it was, right? Pipeline 2. Now in this pipeline, so what is the repository I have selected? GitHub repository. So instead of this GitHub repository, you select your code commit repository. And so what do? First you create a code commit repository. Okay, like I have shown you the steps. Once you create code commit repositories, then your GitHub repository code, the whole source code, which is on your GitHub repository, the whole source code, and you push it to the code commit repository. And after that, so you follow the same steps which we have done. Okay, select the repository and then build steps, also your deploy steps. Understand? Is it clear? Now, so let's see how many of you are going to come with a practical implementation and questions at least. So far you haven't even practiced your Jenkins. Go with CloudTrail. What is the CloudTrail? You can track the activities. Okay. So what are the activities we have done on my account? Some pipelines are being triggered. I've created some news, right? So I want to keep a track of all these things. We can do it through the CloudTrail. So it's only for kind of what things have been done on your account. You want to see that? You can see that on your account. So go with the event history. Click on the event history. Just look at the time now. So there you can see the things what have been taken place on my account. So you can see that. So we have resume process. What is the resume process? Let's see. So that's event ID. So what exactly happened is, so it was trying to manage the load balances, auto scale groups, auto scale groups. So there was auto scaling group created. At what time? At so and so time. Now you can see the histories over here. And so in the histories, one second, let's go back here. Just scroll down. So I've created an application, right? So you can see that. So now there you can see your start build. The build was took place at so and so time. You can see the time and so. And at some time I have created a repository and I've created some applications. You can see the whole process, whatever things have been happened. You can see all things. That is like your logs. I was creating a pipeline. I can see the pipeline, which user has created them. You can see the user, which user has created that. So yeah, just go with the next step. You can just go with this is for only for monitoring purpose, logs purpose. I want to see what has happened in the last week. Some things we have done in the last week, right? But we just need to go back a lot of things here. Still, it is on 3rd. It's still on 3rd, March 30. And I can see that I created some key paste on March 30. I've done some console logins. Who has done the console login? Root user has done the console login. So on the date and time, so you can see CloudTrail is for log purpose, log monitoring purpose. See, CloudWatch is different, CloudTrail is different. Can someone tell me what is the difference between these two? CloudTrail versus CloudWatch. Resource. Yes. So you say service monitoring or instances monitoring, or you can say resources monitoring. So whereas, so CloudTrail is your account monitoring. This is my account. On my account, so which user has logged in and who has done what. So you can see the whole information. Okay, that's your account monitoring. So you can see the resources and all those things. And so where is my back to the instances? EC2. So finally, I want to check that my test application environment or test application EC2 instances. So they have set up some, Beanstalk has set up scaling load balancing concepts automatically. What if I stop my instance, EC2 instance set up by autoscale group and for Beanstalk? So it has to launch another new instance, right? Now, finally, I want to check that whether the autoscale concepts is working successfully for my application. And those autoscale group conditions can be modified. So when you set up the, so what are the conditions we set up? The metrics, autoscaling metrics, CPU utilization in and out, and then also gradient type operations. So based upon this, we can CloudWatch alarms based on this, and then see our instance. That's our application environment. Select it, and then so try to solve the instance. Environment under what VPC your instance is being launched, under which VPC. Select, look at the VPC. Default. I don't think so. It's a default. Because these are applications, I don't think so they'll be launching on default. So they might be creating different VPC. Let's see. Because it is default, then it is open to all, right? So I don't think so. Default, yeah. But if it is on the default, that is a drawback. The reason is that default VPCs are open to all the NACL groups, right? So check the NACL, and for those ones, the NACL is open to all, so which is not secure. Okay, that's default VPC. Okay. That's a big drawback. So it would have been really nice if whenever I launch my Beanstack instance, if they would provide me an option called select a VPC. So I can launch my Beanstack on my own VPCs, but they're launching on default VPCs. So there was no option called select your VPC when for the Beanstack instances. So that's again a drawback, right? So in this case, so this won't work out Beanstack instance, right? So you need to do it on Elastic, or else you can come to default, you change the NACL, change the security groups of the EC2 instances. Yeah, things needs to be modified. Right. So, well, what you're going to practice, like I said, you practice first, you fork my repository. So this is my repository, fork my repository, that's my repository name, fork it, and then you can create the pipeline. First, that is your first thing. So create pipeline. I think this is scenarios are available on the drive. 1 second, is my drive. I download that. So just go with this service. This is the scenarios. Beanstack application Tomcat. So do that first, and create a pipeline for GitHub repository. Okay, and then you have services again, and then so set the webhook as a trigger. You don't need to set up webhook as a trigger. By default, this is a webhook. Okay, but don't forget to select that option when you go to the build steps. There's an option called automatically fetch the code when the code has been committed. Don't forget to do it. If you forget to do it, the pipeline won't be triggered automatically. And also create code commit repository, and then so do some commits onto the repository. So I've given the steps. And unfortunately, I don't have Git bash installed, but you can do it and create new pipeline for code commit as a repository. The pipeline, the code, whatever the project we have on the GitHub repository, commit the whole source code onto the code commit repository. Then you build the pipeline, another new pipeline. And then auto scaling load balancing concepts. So anyway, these concepts are automatically there. You don't need to set it up, but you can change those configurations. try to change the configurations for them. So like I have, so my instance, I have stopped the instance, right? Is it launching a new instance? Let's see. Just refresh this. So which was the instance? Instance was test application. This is the one. Did I not stop it? I think I have stopped it, right? Did I? It's already stopped, but it's not stopped yet. Say that successfully stopped. Then it says successfully stopped. I think the status is not yet updated. But I can see the new instance is launched. That's a new instance which is launched. Yeah, that is just launched. Yeah, of course. It should be okay. Or else it might take some time. So anyway, we have stopped it. It is going to launch a new instance. So that works. That's nothing to worry. And then try to change the configurations of this. Change the configurations and deploy application on secured VPCs. That is okay. So this thing is nothing but, so try to change the VPCs of that. So it has been deployed on default VPC, like, right? That's what I said. So, but I don't want that on default VPCs. Now application, your EC2 instance is already launched. After it is launched, then you can change the VPCs. Or else you can change the default VPC settings. But rather than changing the default VPC securities, so go with that instance and change the subnets as well as VPCs. So that's a good option rather than changing the settings, because default VPC is default. Okay, don't try to change it. And so you can just modify the VPC subnets after instance is launched. Okay, and another application. So by the end of this, you must be clear with this all concepts. Now this is an very important question in interviews. The question is, if I give you an application starting from scratch, can you tell me how you design whole application, how you deploy the whole application with high availability concepts? Or my application should be running with 100% uptime. How do you manage it? Anyone? So this is a common question. So I give you an application, some test application, and I want that application to be deployed and then with high availability. What is the answer? Don't give one word answers. This is not a test. This is an interview question. A detailed explanation is required. Is the only answer? So firstly, when you have an application, so what I do first, since we are deploying application, then initially we need to create securities first. That means VPCs, also get the security group study and get the subnet study. And since it's a web application, I will be creating a public VPC, so public subnet on a VPC, and check the security groups and check the VPC securities and check the NACL as well. And if the application has any private subnets or any databases, I would be deploying those databases on private subnets. So that is my first step. I set up the whole VPCs, subnets, and the securities. And after it is done, then I start deploying the instance onto EC2 instance. And once it has been deployed, and then we take care of the auto scaling load balancing. And the steps are, so you first create an AMI for the EC2 instances, add that AMI to the auto scale group. Okay. And in the auto scale group, you can set up the conditions for how the auto scaling has to be done, different metrics. Then, so create target groups, and then load balancer. And in load balancer, we set up the rules how the load balancing has to be done. And then, so if say for example, my if the user is trying to access something like welcome page, if the URL contains welcome, then I will be routing that into the target group 1, and target group will be routing to the auto scale group 1. And like this, we set up the rules, and then your load balancer will be ready. After the load balancer is ready, and we can create a final DNS name through Route 53. That will be our final step. Okay, so this explanation is required. So don't say load balancer, auto scale. What is that load balancer? The question was, so they want a clear explanation. If you give this explanation, then you'll be having more questions on this explanation. Don't think that that is the end. Then you'll be having questions on NACL. So you'll be having questions on security groups. You'll be questions on load balancers, auto scalers. So these are the most important things. You will take care of it at real time. Okay. And these services we have gone through today: code commit, code deploy, and code pipeline services and Beanstack are also important. And then there is a simple question, like the question I have asked: the difference between CloudWatch versus CloudTrail. Okay. So simple question, very basic question. Anyway, in some screening rounds, not in technical rounds, in screening rounds. So did you work with these services? The screening rounds taken care by, taken by the non-technical people. So they ask these kind of questions: CloudWatch versus CloudTrail, very basic questions. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Any questions? Any more questions? Sorry. Right side. No. Right side is not for our purpose. Not for our purpose. Yeah. So, and those who are interested towards Azure, and so I'm starting Azure sessions from next weekend. Okay. Those who are interested, you can just talk to the admin team. You can enroll with Azure. Okay. Well, thank you. So we don't have any sessions tomorrow. This is our last session for AWS. Next session is on Monday. Thank you.